Someone you love has just stopped breathing. There's no hospital, no funeral home, no phone call to make. Just you, the body, and a decision that has to happen in the next few hours. Because in the world you live in, a body left in the open doesn't stay safe for long. Hyenas can smell blood from over a mile away. So, what do you do? This isn't a hypothetical. For most of human history, death wasn't hidden behind hospital walls or closed caskets. It happened in the open, in front of everyone, all the time. Average life expectancy throughout much of the Paleolithic hovered around 30 years, but that number hides a brutal truth. Roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of all children never reached adulthood. Death wasn't an event. It was a constant companion, and what our ancestors chose to do with their dead ended up shaping who we are today, more than almost anything else they did while alive. Let's go back to the beginning. Because for a long time, scientists believed early humans did nothing at all. A body was simply abandoned, dragged away, or left where it fell. Grief, ritual, ceremony, those ideas seemed like something much more recent, something that arrived with civilization. Then came Shanidar Cave. In 1960, deep in the Zagros Mountains of Iraqi Kurdistan, archaeologist Ralph Solecki was excavating a cave that had sheltered Neanderthals more than 50,000 years ago. There, he found the remains of an adult male, later known as Shanidar 4. The skeleton lay curled inside a shallow pit. Around it, pollen specialist Arlette Leroy-Gourhan identified clusters of pollen from several species of flowers: grape hyacinth, yarrow, cornflower. Solecki reached a conclusion that made headlines around the world. Neanderthals, the supposed brutes of human evolution, had buried one of their own on a bed of flowers. He even titled his book, Shanidar, the First Flower People. But here's the twist that almost nobody remembers. Decades later, researchers returned to examine the pollen again, and they found something the original team had completely missed. The pollen clusters looked almost identical to those left behind by burrowing solitary bees. These bees build nests in loose cave soil, carrying small balls of pollen underground to feed their larvae, which means it's entirely possible that Shanidar 4 was buried with no flowers at all. The world's first funeral bouquet may actually have been the work of insects. For decades, one of the most famous discoveries in Neanderthal archaeology may have been an accident of nature. Here's the thing, though. The flowers being fake doesn't mean the burial was. In 2018, a Cambridge-led research team returned to Shanidar. This time, they uncovered a new Neanderthal skeleton, later named Shanidar Z. It lay in the very same area, dated to around 75,000 years ago. The body had been carefully folded, positioned deliberately, and placed inside ground that showed unmistakable signs of having been dug by hand. This wasn't an accident. Someone chose this exact spot. Someone dug this grave. Someone lowered the body into it. On purpose. The flowers may have belonged to bees, but the burial was undeniably human. So, Neanderthals were deliberately burying their dead at least 75,000 years ago, but about 30,000 years later, on the plains of what is now Russia, something even stranger was happening. In 1969, near the city of Vladimir, archaeologists uncovered one of the most extraordinary graves ever discovered. Inside lay two children, a boy around 12 years old and a girl around 10. They had been buried head to head, covering their bodies that were more than 10,000 mammoth ivory beads. 10,000. Each individual bead took roughly 30 to 45 minutes to carve by hand. Do the math. That's well over 5,000 hours and spent decorating two children who would never wear them. And the beads weren't the only gifts. Beside them lay 16 spears, carefully carved from mammoth tusks, hundreds of pierced fox teeth, ivory pins, antler batons. Nearby, an adult man in his 40s had also been buried with beads and red ochre. But interestingly, he received far fewer grave goods than the children. Anthropologist Eric Trinkhaus, who led the modern reanalysis of Sungir, noticed something even more surprising. One of the boys had unusually short, bowed thigh bones. The other showed almost no wear on his teeth, a sign that he had probably eaten mostly soft food throughout his life, possibly because he was too weak or too ill to chew normally. These weren't the strongest hunters. They may have needed constant care, simply to survive childhood, and yet when they died, they were buried like royalty. That tells us something. No spear, no stone tool, and no campfire story ever could. 34,000 years ago, a person's value wasn't measured only by what they could hunt or carry. Some human societies had already decided that a fragile child's life mattered enough to bury beneath a fortune. And then there's the color, a color that keeps appearing again and again and again. Red ochre, it's there at Sungir, spread across the man's skull. It's there at Shanidar Cave in Israel, nearly 100,000 years old, among the earliest Homo sapiens burials ever discovered. Ochre wasn't rare, it wasn't difficult to collect, but people chose it. They ground it into powder and deliberately placed it on the dead over and over and over again, across tens of thousands of years, across thousands of miles, by groups who never met each other, who shared no common language. The color of blood, the color of life leaving the body. Somehow red meant something to nearly every human group that chose to bury their dead. Now, humans aren't the only species that responds to death. Elephants have been observed standing beside the bones of dead members of their herd for hours, slowly running their trunks and across the skull, sometimes returning to the exact same place years later. Chimpanzees have been filmed carrying the bodies of their dead infants for days, refusing to let them go. Grief, or something very close to it, isn't uniquely human, but ritual is. No elephant has ever ground red pigment into powder as to place it on a body. No chimpanzee has ever spent 5,000 hours carving ivory beads for a child who would never wear them. Animals mourn, only humans bury the dead with a story attached. And that story is the real discovery. A grave isn't just a hole in the ground. It's a message sent forward through time, a message that says this life mattered enough to remember. The moment our ancestors began digging graves on purpose, dusting bodies with red ochre, placing tools beside them for a journey nobody could see. They weren't simply disposing of a corpse. They were inventing an entirely new idea that death isn't the end of meaning. That idea didn't stay inside caves. It became temples, tombstones, memorial services, and even today as it survives every time someone quietly places flowers on a grave, real or not. So I picture that cave one last time. The body lying in front of you, the silence, broken only by the wind, and somewhere out there, hyenas waiting. You don't just walk away. You dig slowly, carefully. You reach down into the red earth and press it onto the skin. You place beside the body whatever you have. That is valuable enough to give away forever. And without realizing it, you've done something no other species has ever done. You've refused to let a life simply disappear tens of thousands of years before anyone wrote a single word, before cities, before temples, before civilization itself. Our ancestors looked at death and decided it deserved meaning. That decision never really ended. It became every funeral, every memorial, every gravestone, every flower left behind for someone who can no longer see it. The next time you stand quietly at someone's grave, remember this: you're taking part in one of the oldest traditions our species has ever created, a tradition that began in caves long before history ever learned how to write it.